Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here with our recap of the closing arguments in the case of the Northern District of Illinois, which represents the United States, versus Kelly, McDavid, and Brown. And so you guys know that this trial was supposed to last a couple of weeks longer than it actually lasted. The government, I believe, said that they needed 4 weeks, and their case ended after 9.5 days. And then I believe Jennifer Bonjean said she needed 2 weeks, but I think her stuff was only a day or two. And then Milton Brown may have said they needed 2 or 3 days. And then I believe that McDavid said that they needed a week. And so none of them, I think the defense took place over maybe 4 days. And so closing arguments began today, and they are expected to wrap up tomorrow by noon. And then the jury will have this case. And so the most exciting thing, I don't know if we'll call it exciting, but the one thing that happened today that stood out is that one of the jurors, who's being identified as a white woman, 30-ish, who looks like she's in her 30s, suddenly had a panic attack and said that she couldn't sit there a minute longer and that she did not want to deliberate on this case. And so speculation is, because we really don't know, but the people that are in the courtroom and the reporters and whatnot, they are speculating that this is a high profile case dealing with a sensitive topic. And you all know that, with the Me Too movement and all of that, that this woman may have been undecided or leaning towards not guilty. And the panic attack was based on the fact that how was she going to go back out in the world and deal with the backlash from the people who know her, who know that she was on this case, who may be pushing her to vote guilty, to vote everybody guilty, and that maybe that didn't set with what she was taking away from the case, and that is what caused the severe panic attack. But chances are we may never know unless the media track her down and she ends up on CNN talking about the case or whatnot. But that is some of the speculation that is taking place. And then I will get into some more stuff that I want to talk about before I hit the recap after this quick break. Okay, so before we get into the recap, the other thing that I wanted to talk about was there have been a few people that have contributed towards the transcripts in this case. And so I want to thank them for their contributions and let you know that every penny that you gave me for transcripts did go towards the transcripts. I stopped purchasing the transcripts after about a week because it was just, I had some, like I've told you guys, I haven't gone into details, but I dealt with a really personal issue over the past few weeks, and then trying to get the transcripts was very taxing on my mental health. I'll just say that. And so I stopped purchasing the transcripts, but no one, at the point that I stopped, nobody else had given any more money because I had stopped saying to you guys to donate to the transcripts. And so thank you to the people that either donated towards the transcripts or the people who were able to get their hands on some transcripts. And then I was able to read over some of those. And so they donated the transcripts to me. So there are several transcripts that I never got around to reading because of what was going on. And I probably will read them just for the sake of future stuff. Like as a YouTuber, you never know when people will wake up. Like I have had videos that had less than 100 views on my channel for a topic, and then all of a sudden that topic became hot, and then all of a sudden all these people were searching for that content, and then it drove my views up by the thousands. And so you never know when you're going to have one of those moments. And then, as I have said to you guys from the very beginning of this whole thing 3 years ago, like I have been covering this R. Kelly case for 3 whole years. And as I told you guys from the beginning, that the reason I read the transcripts is because I'm going to read the document anyway. So why not record myself reading the transcript, and then and then I can share it with other people. So for the people that are like, why are you reading the transcripts? That's why I read the transcripts. Why are you reading the transcripts? You're like 2 weeks late on the transcripts. Either way, I'm going to read the transcripts. There may be somebody else who wants the information, and so they'll have that information if they come across my channel. So that's why I read the late transcripts. But I did want to let you guys know that I probably had about a week's worth of transcripts that people helped donate. We weren't paying the $200 or $300. There were YouTubers out there who were purchasing the transcripts, and then if you made a donation, they would give you a copy of the transcripts. And so that's basically what we were doing. And so I want to thank those people who did that. And then it was something else. Oh, I want to thank people who have given me super chats over the past couple of weeks. You guys know I don't like asking for money, but there are people who appreciate what I do, and so they have done super chats, and super chats are on my premieres that I do. You guys know I don't do live videos. I do what's premieres, which means I pre-recorded the video so that I can be in the chat with you guys while you're watching the video and answer any questions that you have. And then there were people who have given me thanks. And so thanks are similar to super chats, except you give a thanks on a video that's already out there that you come across. And so a person can give a thanks at any point in which they are watching the video, whether it's the first day I upload the video or a year from now, if they want to thank me for the content. And so all of those people, you know who you are. I thank you all individually. And so I don't think I need to go back and read your names, because I did tell you that I thank you, and I sincerely appreciate. And everyone who has sent me a PayPal to go towards the transcripts, I hope I responded to everybody. If I didn't respond to you and you gave me a PayPal donation, please email me, and then I'll look and see if I got the donation. But I'm pretty good at thanking people for their donations. And so I think that was the housekeeping. I just wanted to get into that because, this is coming to a close. We might have a verdict, as early as tomorrow evening, depending on if these people are ready to go home and be done with this case, because they expect closing arguments to wrap up around noontime tomorrow. So that'll give the jury, at least 4 or 5 hours in which they can deliberate. I don't foresee it dragging on for multiple days, maybe a day at the most, day or two at the most, especially if we're basing it on what happened in the Eastern District of New York in his case last year. And so I think that was pretty much the housekeeping issues that I wanted to get into. And just to thank everybody. I know a lot of you were only on my channel because you wanted the information on this trial. So after the verdict is read, and maybe a couple of more follow-up videos, or when I decide to finish reading the transcripts, a few of you may stick around, but for the most part, those of you who decide to move on to something else, I want to thank you for riding with me and being a part of this journey with me. And then I am probably going to take a break. Like a couple, you guys, if you've been riding with me over the 3 years, I'll disappear in a minute for about a month or so. So if you see me disappear, if I disappear and I'm not posting anything over the next few weeks, then I am trying to regroup and transition out of this case and decide what I want to do next. Unlike a lot of people, I did not become a YouTuber to cover the R. Kelly case. Okay, I had my channel years before this whole case started, and I actually wasn't going to cover this case. I was doing a segment called brothers, how you doing, or something like that. I was experimenting with topics, and I would do this: sisters, how you doing? Brothers, how you feeling? A play on Erykah Badu before Call Tyrone, when she did that live performance. And so I had talked about surviving lies, and then when Kim Fox did the call for people to come out and put that 800 number, people started coming back and saying, hey, are you going to cover this? And then when he was indicted, they were like, hey, we hope you'll cover this. And so that's how I got into this. And then the reason it has lasted 3 years that I have been covering this, because my family and my friends are sick and tired of me talking about Mr. Kelly. Okay. And so the reason I continued is because I wasn't familiar with the 2008 case. Not familiar. I knew about it, but it wasn't a case that I followed. It was like I heard about it, on my drive home from work. I might have heard the people talking about it on the radio, but it wasn't something I was invested in. And then after I started downloading the documents and the indictment and all of that, in the Eastern District of New York, and then in this case, I was like, hold up, wait a minute. And then I really, started getting into it and just started seeing all the craziness. And then, going back doing research, like I would be on Lipstick Alley going back, years and years and years on topics, trying to build myself up, get myself caught up to speed on what was going on. And so, doing that research and downloading, the legal documents, it just gave me a whole new perspective on this case. And then, you guys were interested. I think when I first started talking about this, I might have had 90 people, viewing it. And then now I have videos. Some of my videos were up to like 9,000, 10,000 people viewing. And so I know, because I've been behind on readings, that dropped the viewership, but it doesn't matter, because I had that loyal core, who were like, take your time. We still want to hear it. And so I hung in there with you guys. So I wasted 10 minutes telling y'all all that, but I just want to let you know that I do thank you guys, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. And so, as usual, with the recap, you guys know that I will read an article from the Tampa Tribune, and then I follow Megan Crepeau and Jason Mesner on their live tweets, as well as Dave Burns with Courthouse News. And there's another guy, I think, that's with Courthouse News, Michael Tame or something like that. And so let's go ahead and jump into what happened today. And we're starting with the Tribune article. And so you guys follow Jason Mesner and Megan Crepeau, and subscribe to the Chicago Tribune. I think they have a special that's like 6 months for $1 or something like that. So go ahead and subscribe to that if you haven't done so already. So it says, one of the jurors in the federal criminal trial against Kelly and 2 former associates reported she was having a panic attack in the middle of closing arguments Monday, and has been excused from the panel. The juror, a white woman who works for the public library, told courtroom personnel during a break that she, quote unquote, doesn't think she can go on 1 minute more, and that waiting overnight would not help. U.S. District Judge Harry Linenweber said. After a brief discussion, the woman was replaced by an alternate juror, a white man who appeared to be in his 60s. Now that could be good or bad for Mr. Kelly, okay, because he in his 60s and he's a white man. Now, child, is he with the MAGA? Is he one of those people, or is he a man from the 60s who just don't think what he done heard, like he knew some girls back when he was a certain age and knew how they acted and that type of thing. So it can go either way, what his views and opinions are. So downpour can't. Oh, okay, this is something else. I'm sorry. Y'all know they have pictures and articles, links interspersed in the article, and sometimes I miss them. So disregard that part about the downpour. So then it says the development came after about 4 hours of closing arguments in the case, first from prosecutors and then by the lawyer for Kelly's former business manager, Daryl McDavid, and former employee Milton June Brown. The judge sent the jury home until 9 a.m. Tuesday, when Kelly's attorney, Jennifer Bongine, would deliver her closing argument, followed by prosecution rebuttal, jury instructions, and then deliberations. Prosecutors began by reminding jurors of their strongest evidence against the singer, the multiple videos they viewed showing Kelly abusing his goddaughter Rishona. Kelly and his team, they did their best, their level best, to cover up the fact that Robert Kelly, R. Kelly, the R&B superstar, is actually a predator. They did their best, but in the end, they failed. Assistant U.S. Attorney Elizabeth Pizzolo said, "We are here today because those tapes that they concealed for 20 years are no longer their secret. You have seen the tapes. You have seen what Kelly did to Rishona." So meanwhile, the attorney for Kelly's co-defendant, Daryl McDavid, told jurors in his closing argument that the prosecution was riddled with reasonable doubt and based on untrustworthy witnesses, and that McDavid had no way of knowing whether Kelly was really abusing individuals. So the man didn't know, Brindley said. They've got nothing. Their case can't be trusted. Brindley had particular scorn for the testimony of Charles Freeman, whom he called a talentless, typeless t-shirt man, whose testimony about busting into a Georgia home like Shaft to recover a sex tape was just plain stupid. Like Freeman if you want, but you can't believe him because he didn't act like an honest person, and his own words betrayed him as a liar, Brindley said. Attorneys began their arguments after 4 weeks of evidence and testimony, and the presentations promised to be fiery as well as lengthy. Arguments from prosecutors as well as lawyers for Kelly and former associates McDavid and Milton June Brown are expected to last all day and could even spill into Tuesday, when jury deliberations are set to begin. Kelly, McDavid, and Brown allegedly worked together to cover up evidence of Kelly's abuse of Rishona, especially while Kelly was facing Cook County charges for one of the videos at issue in this trial. He was acquitted on those charges in part because he pressured Rishona and her family to lie, according to prosecutors. Okay. And Pizzolo reminded jurors in explicit detail about what they saw on those videos back during the first week of trial. That individual, who had no prior experience in her life, was forced to lay on that floor while that man sitting right over there urinated on her. That degrading act is forever captured on that video, she said. That abuse is forever memorialized. Now, I thought it was determined by y'all, because I ain't see the video, that it was not urine, that it was actually an ejaculation, that he was not peeing on her. Now, I've heard that several times by folks. I don't know how they know, since none of us was there, but they said it was not urine, that it was actually semen. So, as she continued, Pizzolo walked over to within a few feet of Kelly's defense table and pointed directly at the singer. "Who does that?" she said. "Who uses that individual to film a video like this? This man, Robert Kelly." So Kelly, seated between his lawyers in a light gray suit and glasses, stared straight ahead during that dramatic moment. Later, as Pizzolo detailed the charges against him, he bowed his head and shook it slightly back and forth, like, "Lady, if you don't go somewhere and sit down." So McDavid, meanwhile, had stared straight at Pizzolo for much of the argument, sometimes shaking his head or leaning back in his seat with an arm slung over the chair bike as she makes particular points about him. McDavid's lawyer, Bo Brindley, was scheduled to deliver his closing argument after a lunch break. Near the end of her roughly 2-hour argument, Pozzolo displayed photos of Roshona and two of the other individuals, Pauline and Brittany, from their young teens on large monitors in the courtroom. She also reminded jurors of what Kelly looked like around the same time, putting up a photo of him wearing sunglasses, his head shaved, singing "I Believe I Can Fly" at the 1998 Grammys. Prosecutors also anticipated defense attorneys' attacks on prosecution witness Charles Freeman, who testified that he was paid to recover incriminating video footage at the behest of Kelly and his team. While the defense has sought to discredit him, prosecutors said it is the defendants who chose Freeman to do their dirty work in the first place. No, they didn't call an upstanding citizen to get those tapes back. They didn't go to someone who's liable to go to police, Pozzolo said. No, they went to Charles Freeman. They knew Freeman would do this job for money, and he would do it while keeping his mouth shut. And while defense attorneys on cross-examination seized on inconsistencies in testimony from Lisa Van Allen, the core of her testimony has remained the same for years, Pozzolo said. Van Allen, a sometime girlfriend of Kelly's, testified she took a tape from Kelly's gym bag that depicted her and Kelly with an underage Roshona, and then Kelly's team offered her hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it back. Her shame and pain for having that contact with Roshona was evident on the stand, prosecutors said. Is that the demeanor of someone who wants to be here? Pozzolo asked jurors. Is that the demeanor of someone seeking money and fame? The tape purportedly showing Van Allen, Kelly, and Roshona was not shown to jurors. The defense has said that's because it does not exist, and that Kelly's team, in fact, was paying to retrieve a tape showing Kelly's wife. Prosecutors, however, alleged that it did show CP, but Kelly's team successfully covered it up. Both Van Allen and Roshona testified about the taped encounter, and McDavid withheld Van Allen's final payment until after Kelly's Cook County trial, Pozzolo noted. The fact that McDavid withheld $50,000 from Lisa shows you Darren McDavid knew what was on that threesome video. That was not a regular porno, as defense counsel wants to call it. She said if it was a regular porno that would embarrass Kelly, they would just pay the money. Okay, and while Brown was lower on the totem pole, common sense points to his full knowledge of Kelly's abuse of Roshona, Pozzolo noted. Travel records show he was in Mexico at the same time as Roshona and her family after Kelly paid for them to get out of the country, and shortly afterwards he was tasked with driving her to get a tattoo of his name covered up, she said. And when prosecution witness Keith Merrill arrived with an incriminating tape, Brown told him he had the golden egg, Pozzolo noted. Brown was not some innocent bystander who robotically made hotel reservations and drove people to the airport. Brown knew full well what was going on, she said. Prosecutors also anticipated likely defense arguments about Tracy, who testified at this trial that she was 16 when she first had contact with Kelly. A lawsuit filed in the early 2000s, however, claimed she was 17, the legal age of consent in Illinois. But for the criminal charge related to Tracy, Pozzolo said all that matters is whether jurors believe she was under 18 and not 17. Okay, so I want to stick a point here because this was a big discussion on Twitter today. So, the charges against him are not for having sex with her. So, the age of consent in Illinois is 17. That's not the issue here. The issue is the charges include that there are supposedly some videos that were made. It includes that he supposedly assaulted her And then it also, I think she talked about in her testimony that he flew her flew her out to different places. And so for those purposes, once you cross state line, that whole Illinois age of consent thing is out the window, because we all know from the previous trial where they charged him with the Mann Act and trafficking and all that stuff, that once you cross the line with somebody for the purpose of having sex with them, then it becomes a federal charge. And so the federal age of consent is 18. So he could not have made a video with her when she was 17, and he couldn't have flown her anywhere and had sex with her outside of Illinois at the age of at the age of 17, which I think the government is conceding that she really was 17 and not 16. So then it goes on to say, and prosecutors did not call one anticipated complaining witness, Brittany, to the stand during trial, but Pozzolo reminded jurors that two other witnesses, Rishona and Pauline, both testified that they had contact with Kelly and Brittany repeatedly when the girls were of a certain age. So in sum, and I think that because Brittany didn't testify, that her charges should automatically be thrown out, because hey, it's hearsay at that. Well, they say it ain't hearsay if the people who telling the story claim to be there. So we can't call it hearsay, but we can say that they were lying, that they were potentially lying about Brittany. So then it goes on. It says, in sum, Pozzolo said that Kelly abused many individuals over many years. He committed horrible crimes, and he didn't do it alone. All these years later, the hidden side of Kelly has come to light, she said. The truth has come out. So Brindley, meanwhile, began his closing argument by saying McDavid was following the guidance of an experienced legal team, including criminal defense attorney Edward Jensen and longtime entertainment lawyer Gerald Margolis, who would never had staked their careers and reputations to protect him under these circumstances. And it makes you wonder, like, were they just money hungry attorneys? Because like, I really honestly think that when it comes to what this is alleging, that those people who had huge reputations in the entertainment industry, I think that they probably would not have taken this case unless, I don't know, like, as the way they're talking about their reputations and high esteem they were and their services, I think that they all could have afforded to pass on this case. But as attorneys, it is a challenge. When you get a case like this, it may have been a challenge to them. So because they're all deceased, we'll never know. And then we do have Ed Jensen, who on his dying bed, allegedly, we don't know, because it was just him and the reporter who claimed that he said that Kelly was guilty as hell back in 2008. But we don't know if he said that for fact, that this was the reporter claiming that he said this. I don't know if it was a recording of him saying it or whatever, but that raised some ethical issues, because the lawyer should have known that this was a dying man who was heavily medicated when he was interviewing him, and he could have been giving leading questions. And so nobody really knows, because he actually died a couple of months or maybe a few weeks after that interview. So then it moves on. Brindley is talking, and he says, the question I start with is, would they ever do that? These men, would they ever do that? Does it make sense that all of these men would do that for someone they knew was abusing individuals? Really? So Brindley said that the government's own witnesses contradicted the allegations that McDavid was knowingly participating in a conspiracy, including whether McDavid was even present for a meeting in an Oak Park hotel room where Kelly allegedly fessed up to Rishona's parents about the relationship with their daughter. They want Daryl to be in that room, but I'm sorry to say the evidence says he was not, Brindley said. Brindley also noted that Rishona's mother, Valerie, testified she didn't believe that payments Kelly made to the family was to buy their silence. What is striking is the U.S. government trying to get Daryl McDavid, and in so doing, move away from what their own witness said, Brinley said. Brinley chose to abandon the lectern and instead stood directly in front of the jury, walking back and forth with the microphone pinned to his lapel. The microphone seemed superfluous, given that Brinley spoke at top volume for most of his presentation. Child, maybe that's what made the girl have a nervous breakdown. Brinley, because he old, I ain't gonna call him out his name, but anyway, he probably was standing over there staring at her. She probably was like, I am done. I don't want to do this anymore. So they say he argued in the cadence of a preacher, waving his hands and thrusting his fingers in the air to emphasize certain things. He was accompanied by a brightly colored slideshow that flashed his main points on the screen, often in huge white text on red and yellow backgrounds. That story is just plain stupid. One slide stated about Freeman, and on the subsequent slide, just one giant word: ridiculous. After Brinley wrapped up and returned to the defense table, McDavid took off his glasses, sniffed quietly, and wiped away tears. The defendants rested their cases Friday afternoon, while prosecutors had hoped to call witnesses in rebuttal, particularly Kelly's former manager, Barry Hankerson. U.S. District Judge Harry Linen-Weber said they could not call any witnesses who were not ready to go immediately Friday afternoon. Linen-Weber is under pressure to move things along quickly, he said when prosecutors asked to briefly present witnesses Monday. Either do it today or not. And I really think that is going to be grounds for an appeal on both sides. Either side that lose, I think that they can raise that in appeal, that they were rushed. They didn't have time to lay out their case because this man was telling them that they had to hurry up. And the next trial isn't even until October. It's supposed to be another really big trial in Chicago, and that's supposed to take place in October. And then people were saying that he said that the reason he had to hurry up was because some people were supposed to be coming in to take pictures. And I'm like, y'all can't take pictures on the weekend or at night? Like, seriously? But anyway, child, I don't feel like either side was able to do what they needed to do because he was rushing them so bad. Let's see. Okay, then Linen-Weber also denied prosecutors' request to prohibit defense attorneys from quoting from trials transcripts during closing arguments. And guys, I haven't read that motion to y'all yet, but yes, they were trying to tell the judge that they didn't want the defense to be able to quote these folks in the transcripts, that they wanted the jury to base their decision on their memory of the testimony and what they interpreted the people were meaning. And so in this article they go on to say use of transcripts during closing is likely to skew or displace the jurors' independent recollection of testimony and other evidence at trial, creating a reliance of the portions quoted rather than their memory of the evidence in whole, they wrote over the weekend. In a joint response, attorneys for all three defendants shot back, saying such a prohibition would amount to hiding the truth from the jury and in turn usurping them of their truth-seeking function. It has taken over 3 years, but it seems that the government has finally come to the realization that their case is based on the stories of liars, con artists, and extortionists whose word cannot be trusted, they wrote. And then also in that document, oh my God, in that document, it just escaped me what Jennifer Bongine said in that document. Oh, I'll have to read it to you. Like, it was right on the tip of my tongue, and I said, let me finish this sentence. And then I forgot what I was about to say. But I'll read that document in another video. So it says Kelly, 55, faces an indictment charging him with 13 counts. Actually, I'll read it at the end of this video. I'll read it. So it says it has taken over 3 years, but it seems that the government has finally come to the realization that their case is based on the stories of liars, con artists, and extortionists whose word can't be trusted, they wrote. Kelly, 55, faces an indictment charging him with 13 counts of producing and receiving CP, enticing individuals to engage in criminal activity, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. McDavid and Brown are accused alongside him in an alleged scheme to buy back incriminating tapes that had been taken from Kelly's collection and to hide years of alleged abuse. And let's see, we're going to jump into Dave Burns. And I told you guys before, Dave Burns is with Courthouse Network, or Courthouse News, I'm sorry. And so far, I think of all the people that I have come across, he has had the best live tweets of them all. Okay, so let's jump into the live tweets, starting with David Burns with Courthouse News. And if I already said that, I apologize, but I had to stop the recording to go do something and come back. Okay, so Dave Burns, week 5 of the Kelly trial starts this morning. Defense attorney for Kelly and his 2 co-defendants, Darryl McDavid and Milton Brown, rested their case Friday, and closing arguments are set to begin today. Defense attorneys will present their arguments first. Presiding Judge Harry Linen-Weber in the Chicago federal trial rules that Kelly and McDavid will get 105 minutes each to present closings, and Milton Brown will get 45 minutes. Prosecutors will get 3 hours to address the claim against all 3 men. So as a reminder, Kelly faces, and then they give the charges again, which I just read to you guys. Prosecution discussing Kelly allegedly urinating on Rishona in one of the scenes. Then they said that individual who had no prior experience in her life was forced to lay there while that man sitting there urinated on her, prosecution says. And so you guys, if you are just watching this for the first time, so with the article and with the live tweets, you're going to hear a lot of redundancy. But the reason I read each one of them is because, especially with the live tweeting, sometimes there are some things that one person will say, or they're add on to something that another person has said. So you pick up little bits and pieces along the way from what each person gives to the conversation. But a lot of it will be the same information. So he goes on and says, prosecution reminding the jury that Kelly allegedly played Rishona cash in one of the videos so that if it got out, it would appear that she was a prostitute. Prosecution now focusing on video 4, the alleged depiction of a threesome between Rishona, Kelly, and Lisa Van Allen. Rishona testified that she was 14 at the time the video was made. This wasn't a video of Lisa, Kelly, and another adult woman. This was a video of Lisa, Kelly, and Rishona, prosecution says. Prosecution saying that Kelly made 4 videos featuring Rishona between 1998 and 1999 when she was a minor. The leak of the videos, prosecution says, prompted the subsequent conspiracy for which he is currently charged alongside Darryl McDavid and Milton Brown. Prosecution getting into the alleged contract between Kansas City man Chuck Freeman and deceased private investigator Jack Palladino in 2001 for Freeman to return Kelly's stolen performance tapes. And I've shared with you guys previously that Jack Palladino was murdered last February in an alleged robbery attempt. He was beaten up as he was leaving out of his home, and people were arrested in that. But in another case, which involved one of Kelly's attorneys, Linda Minch, I believe it's her last name, who was also killed last year in August of 2021 when she was ran over by a van. The van allegedly backed up and ran over again, making sure she was gone. And although they know who the van was registered to, they have talked to the person that the van was registered to. As of my last reading, nobody has been charged because nobody wants to admit to the fact that they were driving the vehicle. Now, had that been a black man, I'm sure that everybody would have been, all three of them, if they were black, would have been arrested until somebody talked. But my understanding, as of, I guess, a few weeks ago, because the Chicago News, the Tribune actually did a story that nobody had been arrested. So I don't know if it was a real robbery with the Palladino guy, or if somebody, was getting back at him for something. But I just thought it was a huge coincidence that two people who could have played a pivotal role in this case, who may have had knowledge, suddenly were taken out within months of each other. And then we know that Ed Jensen, he actually was ill, very ill, and he passed away in 2019 as all of this was unfolding, and right before Kelly, I think, was indicted. It seemed like somebody else passed away that they talked about. Oh, the other, the original attorney for him died of ALS. What was his name? Jerry Marisol, I believe. So four key people in this case have passed away. So anyway, prosecution says that Palladino and Daryl McDavid contacted Freeman because he was all about the money. They chose Freeman because they knew he would do the job for the right price and not go to law enforcement, prosecution says. Well, that was the purpose. They wanted somebody who wouldn't go to the police because they wanted to keep it under wraps. So prosecution says that Kelly needed Daryl McDavid, his former manager and now co-defendant, to help manage the leak of the tapes. Prosecution says that Kelly needed Daryl McDavid, his former manager and now co-defendant. Okay, he must have typed that twice. Prosecution bringing up the meeting Kelly had with Rashona and her parents in 2001, in which Rashona and Kelly allegedly told her parents they had a relationship. Rashona's mother, Susan, testified earlier in the trial that Daryl McDavid was at the 2001 meeting in a Chicago hotel, though Daryl McDavid said he was in the car outside the hotel at the time. Prosecution says the point of the 2001 meeting between Kelly, Rashona, and her parents was to get the parents on Kelly's side as the Cook County investigation into Kelly was beginning. It worked, prosecution says. Prosecution telling the jury that Kelly told Rashona and her parents to deny that Rashona and Kelly had a relationship to the 2002 grand jury in Cook County. Prosecution says that Chuck Freeman's mid-2002 lawsuit against Kelly was settled so that Freeman wouldn't go public with his knowledge of Kelly's alleged tape. They needed Freeman to stay quiet, so they paid him $100,000 to settle it. Prosecution working to establish that Daryl McDavid and Milton Brown are complicit in Kelly's alleged cover-up of his abuse of Rashona. Is Kelly the only one that's going to deal with this? Absolutely not. He's going to rely on his team. Prosecution now getting into the 2007 drama involving Kelly's ex-girlfriend Lisa Van Allen and her Kansas City friend Keith Murrell. Prosecution says there are records of Milton Brown booking hotel rooms in Chicago for Murrell. And you guys know Keith Murrell was a member of a group called Talent. And I guess Kelly was producing this group or writing for them. And so Lisa, she was flying back and forth between Atlanta and Chicago. And so she was at the hotel because at that point, I don't know how she called herself was the girlfriend, but at that point she wasn't staying. Like, you come to visit your boyfriend, you go and stay at his house, right? But your boyfriend had a whole wife and children. So she was in the hotel, and then she ran into the Keith guy and another member of the band named Ernest, or a member of the group. named Ernest. And so they were complaining about the fact that Kelly was cheap, that he was only giving them $25 a day for food. And so Lisa, I guess, had like unlimited access. She could just charge everything to her room, I think, or maybe she had a credit card, but I think she was charging stuff to her room. So she offered to feed them. And so, in my opinion, that's when the whole scheme took place about this videotape, that she was going to steal these tapes and then they were going to blackmail Kelly with it. So that's who Keith Murrell is. So prosecution says the video in Murrell's possession, allegedly taken by Lisa Van Allen from Kelly's duffel bag in 2002, depicted Van Allen, Kelly, and an underage Rishona engaged in a threesome. It was not, prosecutor says, a tape with only consenting adults, because I think Keith Murrell actually testified that the tape was not, it was 3 adults on the tape is what he claimed. So prosecution telling the jury that Daryl McDavid threatened Van Allen after meeting her in Chicago in 2007, referencing Van Allen's testimony that McDavid said he and Kelly should have murked her, i.e. killed her, for causing Kelly so much trouble. Prosecution says Lisa Van Allen's demeanor on the stand is evidence of her truthfulness. Child, I don't know how, because she probably was licking them lips and stuttering and carrying on, and the fact that she was very combative when she was being cross-examined by Brindley is not signs of truthfulness. So Van Allen cried at several points while giving testimony earlier in the trial, which prosecution says shows she is still haunted from having a threesome with Rishona. So Kelly's federal trial in Chicago now taking a 15-minute break at the prosecution's urging, so as not to overwhelm the jury. Prosecution's closing arguments to continue afterward. And one thing I thought was interesting, and like I said, I still have some transcripts that I haven't read, but I can't figure out why Bonjean didn't bring up the fact that in those documents, like they didn't even bring up the part about Angel Cruel about the employee with the Bureau of Prisons stealing his records, unless they weren't going to introduce. But they could have still brought up the records that he was, because he was at the MCC when the prison people stole the records. Or maybe the jury isn't supposed to know that he's been locked up for the past 3 years waiting on trial. And maybe that's why she didn't bring up the fact that Rishona allegedly was putting money on his books and may have possibly even been going to visit him while he was locked up. Seemed like that was excluded from the testimony, and I don't know if that was strategic or not, or if once I start reading the remainder of the transcripts that indeed came out. I'm not sure. So anyway, they're back from break. It says prosecution's closing statements resuming in the Kelly federal trial in Chicago briefly mentions a $30,000 payment made to Rishona's father, Greg Landfair, who has passed away. And so in 2008, following Kelly's acquittal in Cook County, then addresses Daryl McDavid's testimony last week. Prosecution says much of McDavid's testimony about what other people told him about the alleged Kelly tapes, i.e. Jack Palladino or Kelly's now deceased attorney Jerry Margolis, is hearsay and can only be considered as to how it affected McDavid's state of mind. So prosecution also accuses McDavid of lying on the stand multiple times. She highlights particularly his claim that the tape he recovered in 2007 from Keith Murrell showed Kelly having a threesome with his then wife Andrea and Lisa Van Allen, both legal adults. It makes no sense, prosecution says, that McDavid would be so eager to recover a sex tape featuring only legal adults on the eve of Kelly's 2008 state trial for CP charges. And you guys know that McDavid explained that at that point they thought that if this tape came out that the media would have distorted what it was, and it just would have shined negatively on the case. But most interesting is that this tape that's at the central point of this case was not presented into evidence because nobody knows where this tape is. Now, according to the prosecution, that the tape was turned over to Kelly's lawyers, and I guess they discarded of the tape. But we don't know, child. We don't know if the tape ever existed. And then, like we said, or like Keith Murrell said, I believe it was Keith Murrell or the Chuck Freeman guy, one of them said that it was adults. It was all adults on that tape, that there was not a minor on that tape. So let's see. It says, moving on to Kelly's conspiracy charge. Where is Rishona from 2008 to 2019? Prosecution asks. She is still out there and she can come forward at any time to speak the truth. McDavid and Kelly knew their web of lies would unravel if Rishona decided to come forward. The purpose of this conspiracy was to conceal the tapes of Rishona, to keep the tapes of Rishona from ever coming to light. Prosecution says she highlights a confidentiality agreement signed between McDavid and Kelly in 2014. Okay, well, 2014, child, what about all them years prior to 2014? So moving on to Milton Brown's, Kelly's former personal assistant, alleged involvement in the conspiracy to cover up evidence of Kelly's tapes and alleged abuse. Brown was right there for the conspiracy. Prosecution says acting as a chauffeur, as muscle, a fixer. That child, y'all exaggerating right now. So Brown was not some innocent bystander, prosecution says. Prosecution moving on to the last group of allegations against Kelly, coercion, and enticement. Prosecution brings up Tracy, a woman who says Kelly R''d her while she was under 18. And we already talked about this earlier. Earlier in the trial, defense posited Tracy was 17 when she first had an encounter with Kelly, opposed to her own testimony that she was 16. 17 is the legal age of consent in Illinois. Prosecution says that doesn't matter, only that she was under 18. And I explained to you guys that federal age of consent trumps state in instances where a person was taken over state lines and when there was an image or depiction taken of the activity. So defense has focused on Tracy's testimony for this inconsistency. She claimed to have met Kelly at a Black Women's Expo in 1999, while defense says the event must have taken place in a year later in 2000. Even under that second scenario, Tracy was still 17 when Kelly videotaped her having sex, prosecutors said, dismissing the 16, 17-year-old debate as immaterial to the coercion enticement of a minor charge. And then, was there a video produced of Tracy? And not this Tracy just talking to y'all now, but Tracy Sampson. I can't remember if there was ever a video presented. So to clarify this tweet, while the age of consent in Illinois is 17, the federal age of consent is 18. As this is a federal trial, that is the age prosecution says matter. So prosecution is moving on, and if it was that simple, there would be a whole lot of people in prison right now, in federal prison. But like I said, you have these contributing factors, the making of video and the crossing state lines, because I think Tracy said that he would fly her out to different places to see him in concert. So prosecution is moving on to the testimony provided by Mya. And then also, I think that the lady who hired Tracy as an intern at Epic, I think she also disputed what Tracy's testimony was. And actually, I was reading the live tweets. Tracy, I think, is at the end of Lisa Van Allen, and you guys know I have like one more video to go on Lisa Van Allen, and then I'll get into Tracy's testimony. So it says prosecution's moving on to the testimony provided by Mya, who says she had 2 encounters with Kelly in 1996. When she was 15, prosecution tells the jury Kelly's alleged actions with Mya constitute criminal abuse. Prosecution now discussing Kelly's alleged abuse of Pauline, who claimed to have had sex with Kelly multiple times, including threesomes with Rishona. Prosecution claims that Kelly groomed Pauline to keep her abuse a secret. Circling back. Hold on a second. I lost my place. Okay, circling back to Rishona, whom prosecution says as a 14, 15, 16 child, they didn't know how to say no to Rishona. So basically they're saying that Rishona came to her friends and said, come do this, and they didn't know how to say no to her. No, because if my friends had came to me with this nonsense, that's exactly what I would have said and wouldn't have thought nothing else about it. So prosecution now wrapping up its closing statements. Kelly committed horrible crimes and he didn't do it alone, prosecution says, but adds that now the truth has come out. So presiding judge Harry Lennon Weber has called for lunch in Kelly's federal trial in Chicago following prosecution's closing statements. But those following my Kelly trial threads, I'm not going to tolerate anyone, and this is Dave Burns cussing out people on his timeline. I'm not going to tolerate anyone calling the alleged victims in this case whores or bitches. No matter what you think of them, I won't have that misogyny in my replies. I had to block a few people already. Don't want to do it again. Now, I don't know why he calling it misogyny, because I'm sure it was a lot of women that was in your comments making statements like that too. I personally, every now and then I'll accidentally click see more, and instead of more of his live tweets popping up, it'll be comments from people, and I honestly did not see any of the comments that he's talking about. So let's see. So they call for lunch. He says, stop playing with me. Okay, then it says, now they're back in court. And it says, you will see the truth is the only evidence McDavid ever did anything wrong comes from Freeman and Lisa Van Allen, Brindley says. Ask yourself, were they, Chuck and Lisa, really trustworthy, he says. So now he has started his, and I may have missed a tweet or something saying that they were back from lunch and that Brindley was now on defense. So anyway, it says Brindley also claims that any alleged conspiracy concluded when Kelly was acquitted in his Cook County trial in 2008. And so the conspiracy charge against McDavid must be considered in violation of a statute of limitation. Brindley also alleges that the government has not proven its conspiracy charges against Kelly and McDavid beyond a reasonable doubt. Bringing up a 2014 settlement reached between Kelly and McDavid for $1.3 million, Brindley says the agreement was only about money that Kelly owed McDavid and nothing else. Brindley also goes on to say that the mindset of McDavid is pertinent to the conspiracy charge he faces. McDavid had to actually know that Rishona was on that tape in 2002 in order for the conspiracy charge to stick, Brindley says. He claims prosecution has not proven that McDavid knew any such thing at the time, 2 decades ago. So Brindley, moving on to the meeting Rishona says she had with her parents and Kelly in 2001, in which she allegedly told her parents that she and Kelly had a relationship. Brindley says prosecutors have not proven that McDavid was in the room. The meeting that prosecutors hop on that they jump up and down about, McDavid just wasn't there, Brindley says. Brindley also says there's not one bit of evidence that McDavid knew anything about Milton Brown allegedly accompanying Rishona and her family on their trip to Mexico in 2001. Brindley rebutting the prosecution's assertion that Jane's family was paid off for their silence in Kelly's Cook County trial. The payments that Rishona's family, and I might have said Jane, but it's Rishona, family got, those payments don't have anything to do with the 2002 case, Brindley says. Brindley says that Jack Palladino interviewed Rishona in 2001 and that he reported then that Rishona denied the allegations that she was in a relationship with Kelly. Hold on, I skipped down too far. While she was 14, Rishona denies it all. Her family denies it all, Brinley says. And you know, based on how this whole thing was playing out, I believe that, and I told you guys, I thought that he did, of course, had a relationship with Rishona, but I believe it was when she was of age. And I believe that she was living with them because she was the nanny or whatever was going on, helping Drea with them 3 kids. And that she fell in love with him, had a, crush on him. And that when she, became whatever age, that she decided to go for it. Now, should he have went for it? No, he should not have gone for it. But they strategically placed their words to make sure that they say that it wasn't when she was underage that he had this relationship, but they never say he never ever had a relationship. They always just say it didn't happen during this time frame. So that leads me to believe that there was a relationship. There definitely was, but she was older. And then I don't know what happens, like if you come out and say, well, yeah, they did have a relationship, but it happened at this point. Because remember, they said that she moved in with him and Drea in, what was it, 2001 or something like that? And she lived there until 2008. I can't remember the exact year that she moved in, but she must have moved in when she turned 18 years old and she lived there. So she would have been 18. She was born in 84, so she would have turned 18 in 2002. So, yeah, like 2001 to 2008, I think she lived with him. But anyway, what else did they say? Brinley says that Jack Palladino interviewed Rishona in 2001 and that he reported that Rishona denied the allegations that she was in a relationship with Kelly when she was 14. Rishona denies it all. Her family denies it all, Brinley says. Brinley now addressing the 1996-97 paternity sexual abuse lawsuit brought against Kelly by Tiffany Hawkins, who wasn't even a part of this trial. He says that Kelly's former attorney, Jerry Margolis, found that her story didn't show up under investigation, didn't hold up under investigation. Brinley also says the lawsuits from Hawkins and other women have suspicious links to R. Kelly's former manager, Barry Hankerson, and his former tour manager, Demetrius Smith. Smith allegedly introduced Hawkins to her attorney in the 1996 case, Susan Logan's. All of these denials by Rishona and her family and the suspicious connections to the civil lawsuits, Brinley says, convinced McDavid that the 2002 Cook County indictment was bogus. Who could criticize him for thinking this was a fraud, Brinley says. And then also it wasn't his obligation to do an investigation, to prove that his client had done these things if everything that was being shared with him was saying that, these are scammers. These are just people after money. And now that this is out there, anyone else that comes forward, we need to just pay them off, because the last thing we need is for these people to be then going to the police, saying, oh, well, he did this or he did that, as is happening now and as happened with Surviving Lies. So Brinley now discusses the sex tape in which McDavid said he saw a man's back with a wandering mole. The wandering mole, McDavid testified earlier in the trial, convinced him the tape was fake. They thought they proved it was a fake, and 12 good people agreed. What was McDavid supposed to think, Brinley asked, referring to Kelly's 2008 acquittal. Brinley repeats his claim that there is no evidence that McDavid was aware of Kelly ever having sex with these individuals. Every piece of evidence builds up one upon the next to the ultimate truth that the man didn't know, Brinley says. So what evidence is left? McDavid did anything wrong? In the end, it's Chuck Freeman and Lisa Allen, Brinley says, further saying that neither individual is trustworthy. Brinley has previously posited, that Chuck Freeman, Lisa Van Allen, and Keith Murrow conspired to extort Kelly. He says Freeman in particular is untrustworthy, calling him a talentless, tactless t-shirt man. Brinley says that Freeman's testimony that he recovered and Kelly tape from a house in Atlanta is garbage, particularly since he said he entered the house without conflict and found the tape right on top of the home's TV next to a Disney movie. Oh my Lord. So was Freeman busting in there like Shaft? Brinley says. Brinley repeats that all of this saga with Freeman is disconnected from McDavid. He says Freeman was lying when he testified that McDavid met him in Kansas City with Palladino to recover the Atlanta tape. He lies to put Daryl there where he wasn't, Brinley says. Addressing Freeman's canceled press conference. Oh, then going back to that. So he says that McDavid and Palladino met him in Kansas City to recover that tape. Now they done pulled all these other records. I'm sure they could have pulled flight records proving that Palladino and McDavid. Well, actually, I think they did go there. I think that was in the testimony that they did go there. So yeah, that wouldn't work because I think they did say that they did go there. Okay. Anyway, moving on, child. Let's see. Addressing Freeman's canceled press conference in 2008, Brinley says that McDavid only paid Freeman to cancel the presser to prevent him from spreading more lies in the public. For Chuck Freeman to be telling the truth, Brinley says Jack Palladino, McDavid, and multiple other people involved in the case would all have to be lying. Freeman is a slimy, trustworthy Kansas City street thug, Brinley adds. Now, he might have offended any black people on that on that jury, because one thing black people don't like is for white people to refer to black men as thugs. So that might be a faux pas there, or that might be a costly faux pas there, Brinley. So Brinley says, returning to Freeman's canceled 2008 presser while Kelly's trial was pending, that McDavid was wrong to pay Freeman to cancel it. Nothing is wrong with McDavid preventing Freeman improperly tainting the jury through the press, he says. Moving on to Lisa Van Allen, Brinley similarly says she lied about the sex tape allegedly featuring Van Allen, Kelly, and Rashona. He cites Keith Murrow's testimony that the tape in question seemed to him like a regular threesome. McDavid, in his own testimony, said that the tape Van Allen took from Kelly featured herself, Kelly, and Kelly's ex-wife Andrea, who all would have been of legal age when the tape was made. Van Allen, in her testimony, said she took the tape from Kelly because she didn't want him to see it. Brinley says if that were really the case, she would have destroyed it, not send it to Keith Murrow. So the evidence fits together to expose the lie. Brinley says he contradicts Van Allen's initial testimony that contacting Kelly about the tape in 2007 wasn't about money, with Murrow's testimony that money was a consideration. There's no books, there's no surviving lies. If Van Allen had told the truth about the nature of the tape she took from Kelly, Brinley alleges. So Judge Lennon Weber gives Brinley a 10-minute warning to wrap up his closing statements. And then I just want to interject here. Do you all find it interesting that she stole that tape, that the tape was stolen, right? But there doesn't seem to be any indication that Kelly knew the tape had been stolen. Because what's the point of carrying all these tapes? Like people talking about for years and years and years, he's been walking around with this duffel bag with all these tapes in it, right? Like that duffel bag had to be heavy. Like did he discard of the tapes after a year? Like when did he discard of the tapes and put new tapes in the bag? And when did he move from VHS tapes to DVDs in the bag? Because you had people, I think Ariel even was talking about he walked around with this duffel bag with these tapes in it. And we talking about she met the man in 2015. Wasn't we on to DVDs at that point? So why was he walking around with VHS tapes in 2015, 2016, 2017? And I would just think if he was concerned, like I'm thinking if a person is so paranoid that they're walking around with all these tapes in a bag, right? That one, they would be checking them tapes like every night before he went to bed. He would have had to pull them tapes out and make sure if it was 20 tapes in the bag, that every night there was 20 tapes in that bag. Especially if he was leaving the bag, like Lisa said that he left the bag in the studio, and so he was in the studio recording, but he had set the bag down somewhere where she could get to it. And she went through the videos, putting them in the VCR, looking for the ones that had her in it. Now that had to take some time, right? So he's obviously leaving this bag places where people can easily access the bag. So if he was that paranoid, then you got him in 2013 here in Florida where he was arrested and he had this bag full of alleged videotapes, right, that the government, and that's the other thing, so they're claiming that he had CP on these tapes, right, in 2013 when he was arrested here. But because it was an illegal search, they had to give it back to him. Now, don't you know good and well that was really CP on them tapes that he had when they arrested him, that they would not have let that joker go. They would have found something to stick him with. I just don't believe they would have let him go if that was actual CP on those videos. And then I would think that if you had just been acquitted a few years earlier on those type of charges, that you wouldn't still be walking around with the bag of tapes. Now, wait a minute, let me think. Was it 2013 or was it 2003? Either way, you were already in the midst of or just ended the whole situation. Why would you still be walking around? Like I'm thinking if in 2001, these people, or 2002, they had a whole grand jury talking about you and these tapes. If you were walking around with tapes in a duffel bag, you would have set them tapes on fire. That your attorneys would have gotten that duffel bag and ensured that you burned everything in it and that you never put another tape inside another duffel bag. But here we are 10 years, 15 years later, and people's talking about he's still walking around with these videotapes in the duffel bag. Like that just, it didn't make no sense to me. And then I would think that Ariel, as conniving as she was, that she would have been like Lisa Van Allen and stole some of them tapes out the duffel bag and sent them to her mama and daddy, and so that they could blackmail him since he wasn't doing nothing with her musical career. So the whole thing about the duffel bag is just weird to me. So anyway, let's see, where did I leave off at? So he says so they take the 10 minutes. So now they're back. It says, how much more proof can we give you that Van Allen was lying about Darren McDavid? Brinley says, alleging again that Chuck Freeman and Van Allen have been caught in multiple lies. Brinley now says that Ed Jensen, Jack Palladino, and Jerry Margolis have all spoken from the grave with their documents and reports showing that Darryl McDavid cannot be proven guilty of conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt. Brinley wrapping up now by saying the prosecution has failed to meet their burden of proof, saying all the government has against McDavid is guilty by association via his proximity to Kelly. They promised you clear proof and they did not deliver it. In the end, isn't that all you need to know? Brinley says. With that, he asked the jury to find McDavid not guilty, and Judge Lennon Weber calls for a 15-minute break. Jennifer Bongine is now moving for mistrial, saying Brinley's closing statement implied Kelly's guilt, and that is prejudicial to try Kelly and McDavid together. Repeatedly, the implications was if McDavid knew then what he knew now, it would be different. I come into this trial with three parties that are saying, yeah, Kelly is guilty. Kelly's attorney, Bongine, says, repeating that she believes is highly prejudicial. Judge Lennon Weber denies her motion for mistrial, but he will not let her hold off on giving her closing, on giving her closing statements on Kelly's behalf until tomorrow, to give her as much time as possible to make her case. So Milton Brown's closing statements will be next. Let's see. Okay, so as Brown only faces one charge and the day will likely end after the attorney presents his closing arguments, I'm going to end my live tweeting for the day to work on my full story. Court will start an hour early tomorrow, 9 a.m. for Kelly's closing statements. One last thing, one seated juror was reportedly had a panic attack and informed the court that she cannot continue to serve on the jury. Lyndon Weber says inclination is to excuse her. With no objections by any party, the juror who was reported suffering a panic attack in Kelly's federal trial in Chicago is excused and will be replaced by an alternate juror. Let's see, Megan Crepeau. After 4 weeks, 3 videos, and 34 witnesses, get ready for a full day of closing. So Megan Crepeau is with the Chicago Tribune. So this is her live tweets. After 4 weeks, 3 videos, and 34 witnesses, get ready for a full day of closing arguments in the Kelly trial. Continuing updates here from me and Jason Mesner. And you guys know that they switch off. So in the mornings, Megan is in the overflow room where she's allowed to have her electronic devices out and live tweet, while Jason Mesner is in the courtroom where you can't have any recording devices. And then at lunchtime, they switch off and Jason goes up in the overflow and Megan is in the actual courtroom. So Judge Harry Lyndon Weber is on the bench, y'all. Closings, in fact, might spill into tomorrow, he says. And remember, a lot of this might be redundant to the David Burns, but we're looking for some little extra information that they might throw in. So I just don't see how we're going to be able to get 7 hours of arguments today without killing the jury and without killing me. So we'll go as far as we can today. AUSA Elizabeth Pozzolo starts things off for the government. Kelly and his team, they did their level best to cover up the fact that Kelly, the R&B superstar, is actually a predator. So we already heard that. We are here today because those tapes that they concealed for 20 years are no longer their secret. You have seen the tapes. You have seen what Kelly did to Rashona. And then what's so interesting about these tapes, like, aren't these the tapes that Michael Avenatti turned over? So why wasn't this brought up? Okay, that these tapes came from Avenatti and that Avenatti is now a convicted felon for fraud and, for faking documents and all of that stuff. Okay, so they say that degrading act is forever captured on video, that abuse is forever memorialized. Who does that? Okay, so we already heard that from David Burns. The 4th video, which Kelly is charged with, has not been shown to jurors. Prosecutors say it shows Kelly with Lisa Van Allen and Rashona, and both Rashona and Van Allen testified to its existence. Video 4 is real. It was filmed by this man sitting right over there. Prosecutors, while the defense now wants to discredit Charles Freeman, who testified was paid to retrieve tapes. We did not choose Charles Freeman. These men did. They knew Freeman would do his job for money, and he would do it while keeping his mouth shut. Prosecutors Kelly and McDavid sent Rashona and her parents out of the country as the investigation was ongoing, so they would be isolated from law enforcement and from others who might try to get them to change their minds, and it worked. Rashona told you while she was on these trips, she remained in contact with Kelly, and Kelly kept asking how her parents were doing. Prosecutors said this 17-year-old was tasked with getting her parents on board by her abuser with an enormous weight. There was a pattern to the conspiracy to retrieve the incriminating tapes. prosecutors say. Kelly would make the initial approach and get someone on board, then hand them off to McDavid. This is how Kelly and McDavid's arrangements work. This is how they handled things. McDavid withheld $50,000 from Lisa Van Allen's agreed payment until after Kelly's 2008 trial was over, prosecutors said, which proves it was actually CP and not a regular threesome with his wife. And why is it that they find it so hard to believe that he would have been trying to get a video of his wife from off the streets, from being sold or whatever? Why is that so hard to believe? So, and all the payments were in cash, prosecutors note, not a check or a wire transfer. Well, I guess not. So why bring $200,000 cash if you're recovering an embarrassing but legal tape? Why is it necessary to use cash here, they ask? Because what they were doing was not legal. I'm sure the person that was giving them the tape probably didn't have a checking account. Like, what was he gonna do with a $200,000 check? Like, can you really seriously walk into the Amscot and cash a $200,000 check? Yeah, anyway. So Lisa Van Allen's testimony has been consistent, well, we know that's a lie, on the core issues for years, and her shame and pain were clear on the stand during this testimony. Child, is that the demeanor of someone who wants to be here? Is that the demeanor of someone seeking money and fame? Actually, it is. So on to argument about McDavid's 14-hour marathon testimony. Prosecutors say it's not believable that McDavid would not have watched the footage he was involved in recovering. He claims he never saw the tape despite being the person who authorized payment after payment. Prosecutors, it does make sense that Kelly's team would have gone to such lengths to retrieve a tape. It doesn't make sense that they would retrieve the tape of consenting adults. The video they were concerned about would actually derail his career. The ones that could blow up his state case were the videos involving Rishona. Co-defendant Milton June Brown was lower on the totem pole, but still had an active role in the conspiracy. Brown was not some innocent bystander who robotically made hotel reservations and drove people to the airport. Brown knew full well what was going on. Witness Tracy testified that she was 16. Hold on a second. And this is Tracy Sampson, not Tracy that's talking to you guys. When she had her first contact with Kelly, but a prior lawsuit claimed she was 17. Prosecutors saying, however, that for the specific charge related to Tracy, all that matters is she was under 18. Let's see, the victim being referred to as Brittany did not testify at trial, but prosecutors are reminding jurors that two other witnesses, Rishona and Pauline, both testified that they had contact with Kelly and Brittany repeatedly when they were underage. Prosecutors closing out, Robert Kelly abused many individuals over many years. He committed horrible crimes against these people. And he didn't do it alone. All these years later, the hidden side of Robert Kelly has come out, has come to light. The truth has come out. McDavid's defense is expected to present their closing after the lunch break. Followed Jason Mesner. And so then Jason picks up and says that prosecutor Elizabeth Pozzolo ended her closing argument by putting up photos of Rishona, Pauline, and Brittany on the screen one by one, and she talked about the abuse they allegedly endured by Kelly when they were minors. Kelly at the defense table looked straight ahead. From the Kelly courtroom, Pozzolo has her lectern set up right in front of the benches in the gallery where the jurors are sitting. At the outset of her argument, Pozzolo walked toward Kelly at the defense table and pointed right at him as she described the alleged abuse. The photos were of the girls at age 14 and 15 when the alleged abuse occurred. Earlier in her argument, Pozzolo put up a photo of what Kelly looked like around the same time, sunglasses, shaved head, singing I Believe I Can Fly at the 1998 Grammys. Fez, that child had no prior experience in her life, was forced to lay on that floor while that man sitting right over there urinated on her. Who does that? Who uses an individual in a film to film a video like this. This man, Robert Kelly. I'm in the overflow room for closing arguments by Daryl McDavid's attorney, Bo Brinley. He starts by saying everything, and I'm not there. That's Jason Mesner saying that he's there. He starts by saying everything was done at the direction of Ed Jensen, Jerry Margolis, and other lawyers for Kelly, not McDavid. The question I start with is, would they ever do that? Brinley says. Would they ever do that? Does it make sense that all of these men would do that for someone they knew was abusing children? Really? Brinley brings up reasonable doubt, saying the evidence is not even close to what was stated. To that standard. Is the testimony of Chuck Freeman, Lisa Van Allen, and others beyond a reasonable doubt? Not even close, Brinley says. McDavid, meanwhile, told the truth, he says. Brinley says the conspiracy was a statute of limitations problem. Why? They waited 20 years to bring it. Any conspiracy that they claimed was surely over the day. In 2008, they said Robert Kelly was not guilty. The conspiracy, as they claim, had to be over when the case was over. Brinley says that McDavid's lawsuit settlement had nothing to do with any conspiracy. How do you know? It says it. The government stands here and says there must be a secret purpose. Evidenced by what? With no proof at all, they say, oh, it was for something else. No, it wasn't. Brinley says for McDavid to be guilty, he had to have actually known back then that Rishona was on the tape with Kelly. It cannot be based on what we know now, because that's not fair and it's not right. It's not should have known or could have known. She never told him. Brinley, talking now about the Oak Park Hotel meeting where Kelly allegedly admitted to Rishona's parents he had been having a sexual relationship with her. Prosecutors want Daryl to be in that room, but I'm sorry to say the evidence says he was not, Brinley says. Brinley notes that Rishona's mother, Susan, said she didn't believe that payments Kelly was making to them were for their silence. What is striking is the U.S. government trying to get Daryl McDavid, and in so doing, moving away from what their own witness said, Brinley says. Brinley says that McDavid had no reason to believe Rishona's denials about the relationship with Kelly, but he had undeniable reason to believe that people were trying to lie about sex with Robert, he said, pointing out the lawsuit brought by Tiffany Hawkins. Brinley now brings up Barry Hankerson, Kelly's former manager. They were paying people to lie. That is extraordinary. Think about being Kelly's manager in 2001. People are being paid to lie. What is McDavid supposed to think? Prosecutors were not allowed to call Hankerson. That's what Jason interjects there. So Brinley, talking about Charles Freeman now, whom he calls a talentless, typeless t-shirt man, he's ridiculing his testimony as just plain stupid. Particularly the story about how he busted into a Georgia home like Shaft to recover a sex tape. Freeman lied about where the tape came from. He lied about how he got it. He lied about who was there when he turned it over, Brinley says. Chuck is a slimy, untrustworthy Kansas City street thug. You don't get more of a liar than Chuck. And I told you guys earlier that that thug term may have offended some of the black jurors. So Brinley suggests that Freeman pulled the tape off the internet and made the whole story about its recovery up. 20 years later, when he's investigated for extortion, he comes up with a video and says it's Lisa, but it's not. That's the rotten tomato in this barrel. Brinley's time is almost up. He moved on to Lisa Van Allen, who he says is the government's last hope, unfortunately for them. We've moved on to the infamous Keith Murrell testimony about seeing only a regular threesome on the tape Van Allen sent him. Just like any other porno movie, Brinley says, he didn't see any 14-year-old on that tape. Brinley, I'm not saying Lisa Van Allen never had sex with Rashona. I'm not saying they didn't record it. But the tape that Daryl was involved in, Rashona wasn't on it. Lisa lied about that content and we proved it. Brinley talking about the murked me threat, allegedly by McDavid to Van Allen. She lied about that pretty obviously too, he says. She lied about it because she wanted to allege it in surviving lies, he says. Brinley, when prosecutors get the last word, they'll have to say to you, give me the benefit of the doubt. But in a criminal case, when doubt comes up, the answer is not benefit. The answer is not guilty. Brinley, ending by bringing up the legend of Ed Jensen. Did you expect the evidence to look anything like what you saw from the witness stand? They promised you clear proof, and they did not deliver it. They did not deliver what they said in the opening statement. Brinley ends with this. They didn't give you what they promised. Use your verdict. Say so. Find Daryl McDavid not guilty. So Bonjean is again moving for a mistrial, saying Kelly has been prejudiced by Brinley's theory of the case. Repeatedly, the implication was that if he knew now what he knew then, it would be different, suggesting that they think Kelly is guilty, she says. Bonjean, I come into this closing argument with three parties saying, yeah, he's guilty, but we didn't know about it. It's an overwhelming burden for us. Leinenweber says the jury can weigh any inconsistencies in the defense theories of the case. Motion denied. And then they do the breaking news about the juror having a panic attack and doesn't believe she can continue. Judge says it's juror number 44, who works for a public library, the seventh juror selected. My inclination is to excuse her. Juror 44 is a white woman in her 30s. She said during the jury selection she'd seen headlines about Kelly's allegations, but had not seen surviving lies. Leinenweber, hold on. Leinenweber says the juror reported that she doesn't think she can go 1 minute more and waiting overnight would not help. She's being replaced by an alternate, juror number 83, a male, white, 60-ish. And then just then, one of the jurors who was sat through the weeks of Kelly's trial has been excused in the middle of closing arguments after she said she was having a panic attack and could not continue. She's being replaced by an alternate. So the attorney for Milton June Brown begins her closing argument by saying prosecutors failed miserably at proving Brown knew about any child CP. If you are wondering why Milton Brown is charged in this case, you are definitely not alone. Kelly's employees were told to stay in their lanes, judge says, and all the government's evidence proves is that Brown was doing his job as Kelly's assistant. The government has no proof that Milton Brown ever received CP, she says. And you guys remember Tim Arnold, who testified in the Eastern District of New York. He was might have been Brown's only witness. But basically, he talked about the fact that, they used to get fined, people got fired, paid docked, everything, if they disobeyed the rules that Kelly had put forth to them. So Kelly's, okay, I read that. She says that the judge is then they go on and say the judge is reminding the jury about prosecutors' opening statement that Brown helped Kelly hide his dark side, saying is preposterous. And I'm sorry, Judge. I'm thinking Judge Leinenweber, but I keep forgetting the lady last name is Judge. So she's reminding the jury about prosecutors' opening statement that Brown helped Kelly hide his dark side, saying is preposterous, and there was no such evidence. The government presents a good story, but it's not true. She's talking now about Brown carrying the gym bag where Kelly allegedly stored his tapes, which reminds me of Sam Adams Jr.'s line in his 2008 closing, We're supposed to believe Kelly goes around with a bag of porn tapes everywhere he goes, like some porno Santa Claus. And so I think it's Jason Mesner who is making that statement, not Mary Judge. So carrying Kelly's bags, even if they did contain porn videos, is not enough if Milton Brown did not know what was on the tapes, and there is no evidence that he did, Judge says. After that, Judge is done. The jury is going home until 9 a.m. Tuesday, when Kelly's attorney, Jennifer Bongine, will deliver her closing argument, followed by prosecution rebuttal, jury instructions, and then deliberations. The jury should have the case by early mid-afternoon. And then the last person is Michael Tarm, and he says that the Kelly trial has resumed. Closings should begin shortly. Kelly judge says he doesn't see getting through, and we already know that he said that they wouldn't get through it today, and they didn't. Kelly's lawyer, Jennifer Bongine, says that she doesn't want to give her closing today if they don't get to it until late. I cannot be rushed with a fatigued jury. That would not be fair to Mr. Kelly. And I don't think it's fair that the judge set a timeline on how long these people had to present their closing arguments. So jury enters the courtroom, blah, blah, blah. Prosecutor describes Kelly during closing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we've already read that 100 times. The abuse is forever memorialized, she said. Who does that? Okay, we already said that. More tapes revealing Kelly as an abuser could sink his career and land him in more legal trouble. So he was prepared to pay in the 6 and 7 figures to recoup them, Pozzolo says. The secret would ruin Kelly forever. So yes, the secret was worth $1 million. Prosecutor rebuts suggestions that ex-Kelly girlfriend Lisa Van Allen was seeking fame and money by testifying, and they shouldn't have been allowing them to depict Lisa as a girlfriend, because she wasn't a girlfriend. The man was married at the time, so she was a side chick. She notes the shame and embarrassment Van Allen showed on the stand, which we know was a crock of crap. The prosecutor says that instances of Kelly's ex-business manager and co-defendant never laid eyes on the video or during Kelly's trial to assess was untrue. Yeah, I don't think and then he just wrapped up. He said, Kelly prosecutor says the fact that Kelly accusers had so much to lose. You know what? I actually didn't finish doing his because he doesn't do a continuous live tweet stream. He tweets one by one by one, and then I think I got tired because he was basically saying what everybody else had said. And that was why I had stopped covering his live tweets earlier. So anyway, guys, that's it. I did promise that I was going to read that motion by Bongine, so hold tight while I pull that up. Okay, so it was the motion with the government asking to government's motion to preclude reading of trial transcript to the jury during closing arguments. And so it says the government respectfully moves the court to preclude any party from displaying and or reading portions of the trial transcript to the jury during closing arguments. Allowing any party to directly quote from the trial transcript poses a significant risk that the jury may improperly emphasize one witness's testimony over another, or otherwise cause an undue influence on jurors' evaluation of the evidence during deliberations. As the present instructions reflect, the jury should rely on their collective memories alone when recalling testimony during deliberations. Okay. And let's see, analysis. It is within the discretion of the trial court whether to permit counsel to read the trial transcript during closing argument. In determining whether to provide the jury with trial testimony under any context, the court should weigh the potential that the jury might improperly overemphasize some testimony. And this is quoting United States versus Kuda, which was a case from 1975, and then United States versus Barnaby from the Seventh Circuit in 2011. And then they quote another case: instead, telling jurors to rely on their collective memory avoids the need to provide additional context and risk of any unfair benefit. And using the provision of trial testimony to the jury is particularly sound when the jurors were able to take notes during the course of the trial. Here, the jury observed substantial testimony, including on cross-examination, from numerous witnesses for both the government and the defense. Many of these witnesses, no doubt, left lasting impressions on the jury, not only with regard to the content of the testimony, but also in terms of their credibility. Moreover, jurors were allowed to and did take notes at trial, and will be instructed that you should use your notes only as aids to your memory. Jury Instruction 14. Jurors will likewise be instructed that all of you should rely on your independent recollection of the evidence. In light of this, allowing the display and or reading of trial testimony during closing arguments bears significant risk of distorting jurors' proper evaluation of the evidence. Use of transcripts during closing is likely to skew or displace the jurors' independent recollections of testimony and other evidence at trial, creating a reliance of the portions quoted rather than their memory of the evidence in whole. Such a focus on some testimony over others during cross arguments may serve to undermine the relative weight and credibility of testimonial and other evidence as it occurs during the trial. Lastly, the introduction of trial testimony in any form during closing argument will greatly increase the likelihood of the jury requesting transcripts in whole or in part during deliberations. The current version of the jury instructions following the final jury instruction conference removed a discretionary Seventh Circuit pattern instruction that, quote, transcripts of trial testimony are not available to you. You must rely on your collective memory of the testimony, end quote. Pattern criminal jury instructions of the Seventh Circuit. In the evidence, so they don't even want the people to be able to go back and pull transcripts to refresh their memory. Crazy. In the absence of such an instruction, and if testimony is allowed to be quoted during closing arguments, the jury is far more likely to request trial transcripts to augment deliberations, adding potential delay. Requiring the juries to rely on their collective memories of the evidence alone, including with regard to closing argument, is the most efficient way to conclude deliberations. The issue with that is that the government gets to go last. So even after Bonjean does her closing arguments, the government gets to come behind her and then dispute everything that the defense attorneys have already said. So, child, conclusion. For the foregoing reasons, the United States respectfully requests that the court preclude any party from displaying and or reading portions of the trial transcript to the jury during closing arguments. Respectfully, John Louch, United States Attorney, for these flunkies that they got up there. So hold on, let me pull up on the defense team's joint response to this. Okay, so rather than file separate responses to this nonsense, the defense team got together and just filed one simple response to her, basically telling her, no, it doesn't work that way. And give me a second. Y'all know I be struggling when I be in Adobe. Adobe be wanting to do what it wants to do. Okay, I think I have it now. So it says, come now, defendants Robert Kelly, Darrell McDavid, and Milton Brown, by and through their undersigned attorneys, and respectfully request that this honorable court deny the government's motion to preclude reading of trial transcript to the jury during closing arguments. In support, the following is offered. It has taken over 3 years, but it seems that the government has finally come to the realization that their case is based on the stories of liars, con artists, and extortionists whose word cannot be trusted. This 11th hour realization comes after 4 weeks of testimony wherein the government's witness have not only been continuously impeached on essential elements of their case, but have substantially deviated from the testimony that the government promised this court in their Santiago proffer. Now, child, they said it's been 4 weeks, but we know this trial ain't been no 4 weeks. This trial has been about 3 weeks. So it says, now the government seeks to have the court preclude the defense from identifying statements in their closing arguments made by the government's own witnesses that directly contradicted their manufactured theory against the defendants that the government promised to both this court and jury. Okay, so through their most recent filing, the government seeks to have this court preclude the defendants from using transcripts and highlighting testimony that is otherwise devastating to their case. Their position essentially boils down to the government not wanting the jury to be reminded of what their witnesses actually said during their respective testimony. The defense has been diligently working on their closing arguments, which have been carefully prepared after countless hours of combing through transcripts in an effort to identify witness testimony that needs to be highlighted for the jury. Given the witnesses the government relied on in their case, there was a lot to choose from. The government is obviously free to do the same. Ironically, this very United States Attorney's Office has moved to preclude the undersigned from the use of quotations in their closing PowerPoint presentation. Now this is when it gets funny, y'all. So it says, without presentations, without using transcripts, United States versus Beltran-Leon, Northern District of Illinois, Castillo J. As a result, transcripts, and Castillo would be the judge, I think, who they're citing. As a result, transcripts have been routinely used in closing arguments, particularly in lengthy trials such as the instant matter, and courts have routinely allowed the use of transcripts in closing arguments, including this court. Y'all ready? Oh, child, says United States versus Delator, Northern District of Illinois, Judge Lennon Weber. Not that they didn't use Lennon Weber stuff to come back at him. So United States versus Brown, another case in the Northern District of Illinois, Dow J. United States v. Chester. Then they name a whole bunch of other cases, child. Then it says, aside from this court having the discretion to allow counsel to read trial transcripts during closing arguments, the judge encourages such use of trial transcripts so that counsel can accurately describe the witness's testimony. Let's see. Okay, hold on a second. Let's see. During deliberations, even during deliberations, it was an unlikely possibility that the jury might overemphasize such testimony. Okay, then it goes on and says, stating there is no reason to penalize the use of transcript during closing, thereby putting a premium on counsel's memory. Then that was United States versus Guest, 9th Circuit, 1984. explaining that reading from transcripts are encouraged because counsel must exercise meticulous care to stay with the precise language used by the witness in testifying. And then internal quotations admitted, Burns versus United States, which was in the Ninth Circuit in 1964. A reading of the reporter's transcript of the precise language used by the witness is the only safe way to be accurate. There is no legitimate reason or bias for preventing the jury from hearing what was actually said by the witness. To the contrary, the law recognizes there is less concern of undue emphasis when transcripts are read during closing arguments as opposed to other points in the trial, because in the context of closing arguments, the counsels review the entire evidence for the jury. Even the case cited by the government support the clearly established proposition that trial transcripts are properly allowed to be read to the jury during closing arguments. For example, in Cuda, the Seventh Circuit found no error allowing counsel to read from the trial transcript during closing arguments, as there was no danger of unfair emphasis during closing arguments. And then in United States versus Barnaby, there was no error in providing selected portions of trial transcripts to the jury during their deliberations. And then they cite the Seventh Circuit 2011. Even during deliberations, it was an unlikely possibility that the jury might overemphasize some testimony. Emphasis added, and the district court in United States versus Edwards did not address let me see, reading trial transcripts during closing arguments. Seventh Circuit 2022. Instead, it addressed whether it was proper to instruct the jury to rely on their memories in response to yes or no questions. There, the risk of any unfair benefit came from answering yes or no to the jury's question, not providing them trial transcripts. So they say they misquoting what the other lawsuits were stating. So not only would it be harmful to disallow the use of transcripts in closing arguments, but it would amount to hiding the truth from the jury and in turn usurping them of their truth-seeking function. United States versus Bradley, Second Circuit 1989, finding no abuse of discretion when counsel was permitted to read from the trial transcript. And so they go on to cite a bunch of cases and saying that there's nothing improper, and certainly the defense should be precluded from highlighting specific testimony that was added during trial, as opposed to risking the mischaracterization of critical evidence. Hopefully the latter is not the government's intention. Wherefore, the defendants Kelly, McDavid, and Brown respectfully ask this honorable court to deny the government's motion to preclude reading of trial transcripts to the jury. And as we know, the judge did deny the government's motion, and they were indeed allowed to quote from the transcripts. So guys, that is it for me. My God, this took almost 2 hours. Go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.